Good afternoon and welcome to our ISCA ICAN webinar series today, Advocacy, Advocacy, and More Advocacy. Today we're going to talk about how to implement advocacy in your program every day. With us we have the ISCA Advisory Committee members of Matthew Beck, Cheryl Klein, Riley Drake, and Susan Langen, and they are going to lead our discussion today. Before we give it over to them and get started, I just want to remind everyone that we are going to keep everyone on mute to reduce background noise. We are recording the webinar, so it will be available later for review. If you have questions, go ahead and type them into the question area on your webinar menu, and we will answer them throughout the program. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our committee members and thank everyone for attending.
All right, well, thank you, Brett, too, for hosting the webinars, and we really appreciate the partnership with ICAN because these are such good ways to learn some things and hopefully pick up some ideas for the professional development in the state of Iowa. So today's session, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about different kinds of advocacy. And I have right now on the screen is something that maybe some of you have seen before, but it was something that the committee put together a couple of years ago, kind of similar to the tier 3 steps for your interventions, but we have different levels of advocacy as well. And hopefully, you know, advocacy is an important part, obviously, of your school counseling comprehensive program, and it needs to be embedded in your program, and there's different levels that you can do. And we're going to talk a little bit. Riley's going to share a little bit more about some of the more program things. We're going to touch on School Counseling Week, you know, with Cheryl, and Matt's going to share some overall things too as his perspective as a university grad student. So we have a lot of different perspectives, and we're just kind of excited to see how it all comes together. But I did want to share just real briefly too a little bit about the legislative stuff that's going on right now, because we have a committee of over like 50 50 members, and we're really excited that, you know, if there is an issue that comes up in the legislature this session, that, you know, we can call on those people and they can, you know, make contacts, and we also are going to count a lot on our members to also do that. So we really appreciate everybody's, you know, wanting to learn more about this process and you know, the legislative stuff. We're still learning a lot with our lobbyists and figuring out what we need to do and how we need to do it. But we're excited about Day on the Hill next week. Visit the Hill Day on Wednesday. Hopefully we'll see some of you there, and just hope that the weather stays good so that we can have it next Wednesday. So just so quickly, like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these levels because I think most people have seen this chart before. But, you know, again, your advocacy is, you know, such an important part of your program, and you need to be doing it not just during School Counseling Week and not just, you know, during legislative seasons, but you need to kind of have that embedded in your program and doing the different, you know, components of your comprehensive whole program. So, you know, making sure that you are doing those things during National School Counseling Week and also doing some things at other times, but, you know, just there's lots of things that you can do, and hopefully you'll pick up some things today. So I'm going to turn it over to Riley Drake, and she's going to share a little bit more about her program and how they do advocacy. And hopefully some of you might have seen her recent entry in the School Counselor Advocacy blog, which if you haven't read that, you should go and check that out as well. So Riley, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. As I shared in my blog post, I firmly believe, and had shared this with some graduate students who interviewed me earlier this fall, that as important as advocacy is a school counselor's accountability, and I don't believe that we can really have one without the other. I describe them as being a dependent duo in my blog post. So when I think about accountability, and this is the approach that I take, but I know of a lot of other school counselors who have the same philosophy. When I think about accountability, I think about how are students different as a result of what I am doing. And when I say school counseling programming, I mean in terms of any direct services that I'm providing as a school counselor. So how are students different as a result of the individual counseling that I'm doing with them? How are they different as a result of the small group that they're participating in with me, or how are they different as a result of classroom counseling or school-wide interventions that I have in place. And in order to be accountable, I look at process, perception, and results data. And sometimes, you know, the easiest thing for us to get is the process data or is the perception data. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. But what I found is that stakeholders are most often interested and care about results data. Process data is how many students are being impacted. So if I'm working with one student, I'm impacting one student. If I'm working with a small group of 7, my perception data would be looking at 7 students. And that is really looking at how are students affected and in terms of anything that's related to their academic achievement. So when I'm thinking about results, I'm thinking about how am I affecting them, how are they being impacted in terms of their school success. Then hand in hand with that is advocacy, and how am I sharing the effectiveness of my programming with my stakeholders. And the way that I do this is most often through results reports. The first link that I have provided below is my blog post that I wrote, and Susan, if I click on that, will that allow me to pull it up?
I think so. Yeah.
Is it going?
Yep.
Okay, so this goes into a lot more detail, so I won't necessarily need to right now, but this goes into a lot more detail about how I provided the results report to some key stakeholders from my district and was able to share some of the classroom counseling that we were doing building-wide. From there, now how do I go back?
Okay, I think, let me take over for a second, and then let me go.
Oh, perfect.
And there is a link on the ISCA website, if you know, for the School Counselor Advocacy blog too, and I think I put it in that last newsletter as well.
Right. Right.
Update.
Okay. And then if a results report that I shared with stakeholders is here, and then this is where kind of that key information is. This is pretty wordy. I really think that it's best if your results reports stick with the most important information, but there was so much that went into this unit that I had a hard time condensing it to even this. I made sure and reference any evidence-based sources that I used. John Hattie is someone who's recognized for all of his meta-analyses and the work that he's done that looks at what impacts student achievement, and so in our district he's widely respected. I made sure and reference that I had used his visible learning book in the work that I had done. The time frame, again, I had that process data that's recorded, the perception data, the student information that I gathered about what students learned, believed, or think that they can demonstrate, or what they can demonstrate. The results data is to be determined because our students take those next week, so or in 2 weeks. So I wanted to make sure that I had something to share about how it was impacting their educational achievement, so I had teachers provide some anecdotal evidence that I included on that as well. So you can take a look at that more later if you would like. Moving on, another way that I make sure to keep accountability and advocacy in check is by letting the data talk for me. And one way that we do this at Sawyer is we run what's called EIS, and this is an early indicator system. The state identifies students as being at risk based on 4 criteria. Students have to meet 2 out of the 4, and they look at attendance, behavior referrals, course completion, and scores. Course completion at the elementary level is grades. Scores are any types of testing scores, so that could be benchmarking or IO assessments, FAST scores, depending on what your school uses. What we do is we have meetings, and I run a report that identifies students who are considered the most at risk, and they have to obviously meet 2 out of the 4 criteria. We analyze that data and bring context to the data, meaning that we have conversations about what is happening with those students. Maybe they have they're at risk in the area of attendance, but they went on a vacation. So we know that that's not a student who we need to be concerned about. But what this system does is it lets us recognize students who may be at risk for dropout. And so by intervening at these early stages and identifying appropriate interventions if we need to, then we help to make sure that we are nipping this in the bud before they get into middle school, before they get into high school. And what we found is that I started an attendance intervention at the very beginning of the year. even before we had our first EIS meeting. And we had no students who were identified in the area of attendance, meaning that no students were considered at risk in my building. In the attendance area, they had no rank based on this intervention that was in place. So when we analyze our intervention effectiveness and we look at how effective was our intervention, I can say without a doubt that that intervention that I've had in place since the beginning of the year has been very effective. So the decision is to keep that in place. I've had some students who I've pulled out of that intervention, some who I've continued, and some that I've had to intensify as of late. We continue to monitor students who have shown up, but what helps, especially having teachers, special ed teachers, success teachers who are providing that reading and math instruction support, come to the table, is that we're able to bring, like I said, the context to the data. So we have a student who has a high number of behavior referrals. We also have a student who has a high number of ones on their report card. Let's talk about what's going on. What interventions are currently in place? There's not one in place. Okay, we need to make sure we start a supplemental plan. We need to look at that tier 2 support. So what are their scores? Well, this score is telling me this. We need to make some changes. So these EIS meetings, when we bring context to the data, we're able to make sure that all key players are at the table, and again, everyone has a responsibility, and especially in some of these areas where, as a school counselor, I can be most influential when I design an intervention and I bring it back to the table, and then we rerun the test, we rerun the EIS, and we see that the scores have changed substantially. I'm able to show that what I'm doing, it has been very effective, and again, the data talks for me. The last thing that I have to share today is for National School Counseling Week, and I believe in making best use of time. Kind of my philosophy is that I'm not going to do something if it's only going to affect a small group of people. I want to make sure that I am hitting the largest number of people that I can with the information that I can provide, and it's going to make a lot of noise. And so, bang for your buck. I think one of the best ways that we can advocate for our position is through any communication that's community-wide. I wrote an article this year about the work that I do as an elementary counselor, but I made sure that it was inclusive. We have 5 elementary school and family counselors in Ames, elementary school counselors that work together, and so I have been making sure that I included them in the article, so they were recognized and referenced as well. You can take a look here. This article will be published in our community newspaper next week. And there's also a middle school counselor and a high school counselor who have written articles as well, so that they can talk about their work. Again, I think it's really important that we take this time. I'm going to wait just a second. I have some people who are. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they don't look as big as usual.
Again, I think that it's really important that we share what we are doing and how we are doing it, how we are accountable to our students while we advocate for ourselves. So I tried to make sure that my article represented that. Thank you very much.
Riley, I want to just ask a question quick about, did you approach the Ames Tribune, and how receptive were they?
This is really interesting. A couple of years ago, I was doing some, I think I was doing some work with our school garden, and so they had caught wind of it, and they kind of approached me and asked me about it, and we got along so well that they have just reached out a number of times, and I mean, I've written I don't know how many articles for them now, and our director of media relations, Kathy Hansen, and she's always asking me what I'm doing and asking if I can write a statement, or if I can write an article, or if I can do this or that. So we had the STEM thing. I connected some learning outcomes to STEM recently, and when she heard about it, she asked if she could come and do an article. And then while she was here, she said, I heard National School Counseling Week is coming up. Would you mind writing an article about it? And I was like, yeah, sure. So she had heard about it, and she approached me, but I think that that's because of the partnership and the relationship that we established already when I had kind of written some other things for them.
That is awesome, because I know even when I was president of ISCA and tried to get, like some of the papers to do an article, and there's, usually lots of resistance. So, but I do think that relationship had a big piece for that.
Definitely, definitely.
Oh, thank you very much, Riley. That was awesome. And her examples, if you haven't checked out that blog, especially that results report, I think that is such a great example, because I know, we try to, like, at high school when we write our plans and things, but sometimes we don't get to that final push where we've written down all the results and then actually shared it. So that was a really good example and very inspiring.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Cheryl, do you want to go next?
Sure. Okay, so my name is Cheryl Klein, and I am one of the 910 counselors at Linn-Mar High School, and I'm going to just share some information about some things that I have done in my previous role and in my current role as a school counselor, and some of the things we have planned for National School Counseling Week as well. So before my position here at Linn-Mar, I was at Central City, and I started out as the only counselor there. And when I started, of course, I was the guidance counselor, and we all cringe when we hear that word. And it took some work to have that title changed. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we changed it at Central City. And then also, my last year at Central City, we added another another school counselor to our staff, which was really nice. It definitely wasn't still an ideal situation, but it was definitely a little bit better than what we had before. So a few things that I think are really important, and something that I've presented on at ISCA before, is the relationship with your administrators is key in changing your name, your role from guidance counselor to professional school counselor. And then they also can help you with adding counseling staff, because often they help with the budget at your building. So I've been very lucky to work with some awesome administrators who I feel like understand the role that I have and are willing to listen to what I have to say about my role. So I would encourage you that if you're not working with your administrator closely, to start that relationship. And it can start with just a meeting every week or every other week whenever you have time to just sit down and let them know what you're doing. Because oftentimes we find that our administrators don't necessarily know what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. They might see us sitting in our office working on our computer, and they think we're just, checking out Pinterest or something, when we're actually responding to parent emails or working on finding some resources to help a student with various things that they come to our office with. So talk with administrators, create a weekly meeting or monthly meeting that can help them stay on top of what you're doing every day. And so that kind of helps them also understand how you're impacting students and who you're impacting on a day-to-day basis. When you're meeting with them, use specific examples of the work you do. So if you have a great lesson that has had awesome results, share those with your administrator. I think that it's important to kind of brag about yourself and let them know when you had an awesome result to whatever you're working on, so that they can see the exact things that you're doing. With them, share the change in the Board of Educational Examiners title that's on our license. Our license says professional school counselor, and so it would only make sense that our role is changed at the school level to a professional school counselor. Of course, you're still going to receive resistance here at Linn-Mar. We are still guidance counselors, and you'll find our name written as school counselor or guidance counselor depending on where you're at. So actually, I was really excited. About a week and a half ago, our principal had ordered us new name tags, and so now I have a school counselor name tag, so I was pretty excited about that. I posted on my Twitter. So our door still says guidance counselor. We're still listed as guidance counselor in our Board of Education documents, but it's something that we want to work on. And so the next step is presenting to our school board. We've kind of made it our mission this year to get in with our new superintendent and to be able to present to him what we're doing at the high school at least, and let him know that our first priority is helping students be successful to become lifelong learners, which is one of our district goals. So we're aligning our presentation with those goals so they understand how we are going to help our students be what we all believe they should be someday. So that's currently, we were a little disappointed. We're not scheduled until May, but it's been a busy year with a new superintendent, and he has a lot of different things that he wants to get on the agenda before then. So hopefully that will go well, and we'll hopefully see a change from that. The next area that I have is repeat your message. I found at Central City that if I kept saying stuff, I didn't let them forget what I was wanting or what I was doing, especially with adding counseling staff. I probably annoyed them sometimes because they'd talk about adding new things or doing something different, and I'd say, you know, it'd be really great. I would really be able to do that if we had another school counselor. So I was very vocal about how I felt about being the only school counselor in a building with 440 students, and it turns out that they saw everything that I was doing and talking with my administrators about what I was doing all of the time, and so they understood where I was coming from, and I had something to back up what I was saying. So I wasn't just saying it, I was showing it in what I was doing every day too. So the last thing is, at Central City, oftentimes they would ask me about certain things, and they'd say, well, do you know how many of our students are going on to a four-year college? And I knew that data. I had that right off the click of my fingers. I could tell them what it was and tell them information about what our students were doing. And oftentimes my administrator might not have known that. So I knew information that they didn't know, and so I became valuable in that way, that I had that information at hand whenever we needed it. And I was oftentimes a data guru there, so I did a lot with data with our IO assessments and things like that too, to talk about achievement data that we were concerned about as well. So all of those things together helped me advocate for a new school counselor or additional school counselor. I said that it wasn't the ideal situation, so what happened was we added another school counselor, but she was shared with another school next to us, and she was doing elementary at both buildings. They had previously only had one school counselor as well, so it benefited the students for sure, but it could have definitely been a different situation, and the sharing agreement helped my cause a little bit. So I had encouraged them to continue to consider adding a full-time person in the elementary rather than someone who is shared, because that's a very difficult role and one that I did not envy her to have to do. So for National School Counselor Week, I have done something every year since I become a school counselor, because it's just kind of fun to celebrate our roles and get more people involved in what we're doing. So the first year as a school counselor, I provided a lot of snacks and things like that, and just put up signs everywhere and things like that. But this year at Linn-Mar, we're going to try some new things that we hadn't done before. And the first one I think is important because it goes back to helping us get our name changed and things like that. So we decided to write individual thank you notes to our important stakeholders. So we are writing individual thank you notes to our administrators to thank them for some of the things that we have been able to do as a department here at Linn-Mar. For example, we are getting a brand new college and career center with some of our construction that's going on in the district. So we're really excited about that. They have given us more time to do things in classrooms and have really advocated us to be in the classrooms a little bit more. And they've been the one to ask if we can do that with department heads rather than us having to go to them. So having that administrator support has been really great. So we're going to thank them for that and a couple other things. Other people that you could thank are school board members that you know have been really pushing for you, teacher leaders, specific teachers that really are helping you with different things that you're doing in your building, anybody that you think, or parents that have been really supportive. I think all of those people are great people to thank during that week because they're supporting us in our roles, just like we support them in theirs. The second one is food. Everybody loves food, so we'll probably have some snacks in our teacher workroom during that week, and then we're also going to send out individual little candy bars. You can find lots of ideas on Pinterest about what you can say along with those that kind of have a theme with your candy bar. So one of them was the Three Musketeers, so I think that's what we're doing right now. One of our other counselors is working on that. And then individual recognition. One thing that, since we're such a large district and we have lots of counselors and lots of buildings, I wanted to recognize all of our school counselors and not just here in our building at the high school. We don't often see our elementary or middle school counselors as much as we would like, so we'll be finding ways to recognize them and sending them little notes that week too, so they know that we're thinking about them and that we're thankful for all the work that they do, because they're preparing our kids for high school, so we want to recognize those things as well. Definitely using social media. If you have looked at the American School Counseling Association website, they have a list of things that you can do each day that week. So one of them, they have a new shirt out. If you've become a member in the last couple of weeks, you can get a shirt that says guidance counselor and guidance is crossed out and has school above it. So one of the days is to take a picture with that shirt. You can take a picture with your ISCA t-shirt from last year's conference, whatever it might be. Just advertising on social media the things that you're doing to promote National School Counseling Week is a great idea. We are also going to be doing some building announcements. We run announcements on through our LMTV, Linmar TV, so our students, I've asked that when they start our Counseling Corner announcements that they just let students know that it's National School Counseling Week and that they should stop by their school counselor's office and thank them for all that they do. So hopefully some of our other counselors will have some students come in and thanking them, and not all of the counselors are involved in this, so that it'll be a surprise for them, hopefully. And then the last thing is I am providing about a half page of notes for teachers in the lounge so they can just learn a little bit more about being a school counselor. Oh, and I thought I had shared it with everybody, but I'll share it so that you can see it as well. But I just put some history about school counselors. I also included how long that we just did our 50th anniversary as a state association. I included how many years of experience we have as a collective school counseling department. So we have over 40 years of experience with us. We have some young staff. And then also put in a little information about where we went to college and what our educational background is. So just some information personally about us, and then it's about school counselors as a profession, so they just have a little bit more background about school counselors. So that's our plan for next week.
Oh, Cheryl, if you could share that, that would be awesome. I'm getting some ideas here for us next week as you share some of those things, because that's great.
Yes, I will open it up so everyone can see it. Sorry about that.
Oh, perfect. No, and thank you again, because like I said, you bring that whole perspective about that persistence with the, school counselor to guidance counselor, and that's a huge part, I think, of advocacy, and telling people why and showing people why makes a big difference in how perceive us, but especially to the principal, the administration, that relationship is so important. And I think once you get them on board, that's a really big thing. So you brought up some really good points that we need to be doing as school counselors in our advocacy. Perfect. All right. Well, then I think we're going to roll over to Matthew Beck, and he's going to talk a little bit more about it from a little bit different perspective. So I'm going to let Matt talk and share from his point of view.
Sounds great. Thank you, Susan, for that introduction. I'm going to jump back here.
Whoops, I think, sorry.
There we go. So welcome, everyone. As Susan shared, I am Matthew Beck, and I am a former school counselor. I am a current doc student at the University of Iowa, and I'm also a clinical faculty member in the counseling department over at Western Illinois University in the Quad Cities. And so today I'm going to share some of my prior experiences that I learned as an advocate when I was a school counselor, but I'm also going to take a different spin on this and looking at a research project that myself and Erin Lane, who is also an ISCA member and also an ISCA Advocacy Committee member, we just wrapped up actually last week on a year-long advocacy study that really has looked at what are the experiences, what are the processes of school counselors who engage in advocacy on a daily basis. And so what we really did was look at the experiences of ISCA School Counselor of the Year finalists, in which they are right now in DC and on their advocacy journey. And so I thought this was really timely and relevant for us, and also as we get ready as ISCA members to go to visit on the Hill next week. And so the spin I want to take on this today is really that advocacy begins with each and every one of us, and it requires that we look at ourselves and then also the school culture that we're working in first. And so one of the main findings that Erin and I found in our study was that advocacy is very much of a process, and it requires that each of us has to really assess our risk, our comfort, our discomfort, and also really look at our advocacy skills. And specifically, we had 15 14 participants in our study that really talked about the importance of looking at our strengths. What are we really good at? Is it that we're able to build that relationship with the school principal? Is it that we're able to explain that data that Riley and Cheryl talked about as well, but also looking at what are some areas for future growth, and so looking at it that is a necessary part of our advocacy journey as school counselors. The other part of that involves really timing, and this is something that I didn't really realize too much until I was kind of outside of the school counselor practitioner realm, is that advocacy work really takes time. And what hit for me in this presentation today was that when Cheryl and Riley were really talking about building that relationship with the principal, and specifically in Linn-Mar, and changing from that guidance counselor to professional school counseling in the way that is now, is that really takes time, and that you have to really know your school culture and where you're working, and how do those values and those attitudes intersect with where we're at and working in our school as well. So those kind of one of the main things. It requires for us to kind of take a step back, to process, to engage in who we are as an advocate. So I encourage everyone after our webinar today to really take a few moments and think about where you're at in your advocacy journey, whether you are at the beginning of your first 5 years as a school counselor, or if you are in your final years in retirement, and where you're at with that, and reflecting upon what's working, how do you feel you need to grow, and how can you move forward and then adapt that into your own school culture as you move forward. The second theme I would like to talk about today is, again, what our prior presenters really talked about, was forming that collaborative partnerships. And specifically in our study with the SCOI finalists, Erin and I found that should not be too surprising to many of us today, but really the school counselor and principal relationship is really the backbone that fosters our advocacy work in schools. And one of the findings with that is that we really need to be proactive about what we do. And this reminded me, I journaled a lot throughout this research study, because it reminded me that in my prior work, is that I kind of wanted to beat my school principal in telling them what I do as a school counselor, as compared to them telling me the things that I was supposed to do. Oftentimes they would come to me, bus duties, extra lunchroom duties, but since they knew what I did as a school counselor going into that, they realized that was when I was doing lunch group meetings. That is when I was meeting with parents during that hour as well. So it requires that we are basically trying to be ahead of the curve and being that voice and telling others what we do before they tell us. It also requires that through our work with our principals, that we can open and change in their mindsets regarding our role of school counselors as well. I think it's important that we involve our principals with our advocacy work. That was one of the main findings as well in our study, is that when we go to visit on the Hill, is there an opportunity to bring our principals with us next week? If not, is there an opportunity to share with them and sit down and talk about, these are the things that we are advocating for, these are the things that I learned and I grew from, because through that then we can change their mindsets regarding our role and function as well. I think that it's also important that we consider the perspectives of our principals, is that when we are going and asking and advocating on behalf of a student, perhaps if it's a student that has been marginalized in your school, is that we can reflect and think about, from the principal's perspective, how does that look from their side of the desk? How does that influence the decisions that they have to make? And I think it's important that when we realize that, we can gain awareness in what they're thinking about, and oftentimes that can synthesize more of an agreement when we're trying to advocate and really develop that shared initiative with our principals. As you heard, well, I think everyone today, Riley and Cheryl really talked about the importance of using data to pinpoint student needs. In particular, one participant in our study talked about their way that they built their school counselor principal relationship with regards to advocacy, was that they met their principal at the door with their data. And that's how that particular participant each year sat down with that data and these were the benchmarks. This is what the needs were showing us and how to move forward with that. And so that was built then from the relationship. I think it's important, and this is something that I learned as a prior practitioner, is that we have to be flexible as school counselors, and we have to realize that we don't want to burn bridges, and that sometimes we don't always get what we want, and it takes time. And that is, again, is a process, and it's fostered through that relationship. An important theme in our study was really developing your advocacy brand. And this really, for me, thinks about how we market, how we sell, who we are and what we do in the profession. And so that involves making our advocacy message clear and simple. I like to think of this as that 30-second elevator speech, that we're in that elevator with someone who may or may not have any idea what we do as professional school counselors. And so we have 30 seconds until we get to that next floor to really articulate what are those concise involves really practicing that. So when we're with others at Visit on the Hill, or we're at ISCA's sessions, or even just networking, or even with our next door school counselors in our district, or if you're in a rural area, maybe the neighboring district over, is that you practice that through role plays, and you talk about ways to strengthen and foster that message as well. I think I hit on this earlier, is about informing others what we do before they tell us what we have to do. It was very clear in Riley's story that in her work with the newspaper that she had a very strong relationship, and so she was very proactive on that, and through that is really an advocacy tool to market her program and what we do as a profession. I think it's important to really get involved and to network and learn from others how they market their message. And of course, scaffolding in that data and using success stories. This was something I wish I would have done more as a school counselor, is really enlisting the stories and the narratives of our students and how we truly make a difference in their lives and in the families as well. And so I think when we can integrate that into our advocacy message and through our marketing tool, I think that we can really kind of pull at the purse strings if we're looking for money, or we can really, if we're sitting at a board meeting, we can really help to open the mindsets as that our work is truly making a difference when we incorporate that personal message with the data. And both Riley and Cheryl really talked about the importance of following up, is sharing those messages, thanking others, thanking our legislators, sending those messages and those emails that Susan shares with us, and how to market ourselves, is make sure that we follow up and thank others, and that we're also persistent, and that we're keeping ahead of the curve as well with your advocacy brand. So those are kind of some takeaways from our study that we are looking forward to sharing. It is just in review with Professional School Counseling, which is the flagship journal for ISCA, and so we hope that that'll get in the hands of school counseling. Probably take a while, but we're looking forward to getting that message out as well, and we'll also be sharing a session at Visit on the Hill next week with regards to our study. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Matt. That was awesome. Again, how you kind of tied everything together. And I really like how you put together the process, and it is a process. And even I'm sitting here thinking, holy cow, I've been doing this for a long time, but I just get a little bit more inspired by hearing all of you share those things, and it just makes me want to do, a little bit more. So one thing I would share too, for, when Cheryl was talking about some ideas for School Counselor Week, and this year at ISCA, we had the fund for the school counselor, ISCA School Counselor Scholarship, and I know that that we had some entries for that, and I think we're going to get some information about that. So, the scholarship for the students, they had to fill out an essay question about how a school counselor impacted them, and so we're going to use that information with our legislators and share, because that's great, great tools to use, and it's stories right from the students. So at Cedar Falls High School this year, we get to wear jeans on Fridays for $5. So our principal is letting us for the first Friday of every month, we are collecting jeans, or $5 to wear jeans, and then we're putting it all together for a scholarship fund for at the end of the year. We're going to give out a scholarship too, but we're going to have kind of use the same model where we are going to have them write about it, like an educator at Cedar Falls High School who may have impacted you. But I thought, what a great opportunity to again share and not make it be a lot of extra work, but everybody just kind of benefits from it. So the things that I have here at the end are things that already have kind of been shared. Just some different examples of things that we've done at Cedar Falls High School. That 134, that school counseling department, that took a couple years, Cheryl, to get that changed. It was school guidance, department for a long time. So keep working at that. But just some other posters and things. I would share that AEA has some really good. Your AEA might have some really good resources that you can use. This was just a poster that we put together too for our students and our teachers too, and it's so easy these days to be distracted with everything, and especially with media and all the different stuff. So just kind of reminding people to pay attention. We have a video that we share every year during that we used on a school board presentation, and we're going to put that out too and share that this year. So make sure that you check that out too, because it's really good. This is the school counselor advocacy log. Hopefully it'll come up. Yeah, there it is right there. If you haven't seen that before, make sure you check that out, because Matthew has a really good article in that too from this summer. And Cheryl, I think you're up next to write an article, but it's really some good stories, and it would be really helpful to get some ideas and be inspired. So just again, the legislative stuff is important as well, making sure that you continue those efforts. There's a picture of our lobbyists, which, like I said, that's a learning process. This is the second year that we've had those, and we just need to keep, kind of plugging along and learning and stepping up for ourselves and to be represented in the legislature. So this is the last slide that I have, and again, it's kind of what the other counselors all talked about too, is that thanking people and making sure you're showing your gratitude. And I think one of the biggest concerns I hear about National School Counseling Week is, well, why do we have to kind of, show our appreciations for other people? Shouldn't they be showing appreciation for us? And it's like, it would be nice if they would do that. And I know some schools do get some really nice, things get done for them during the National School Counselor Week. But we just can't wait, and showing our gratitude models for them, and I think it just gives everybody a little bit more perspective about what we do. So that's what we have for our webinar, and we still have a bit of time if we can get some questions. I'm going to go back and pull this up. Britt, I don't know if you have any questions, or if
we don't have any questions at the moment, but if you guys want to type some in, we are open to questions now. And while you're thinking about what questions you might have to ask, I wanted to point out that a common theme today was the importance of the counselor-principal relationship. And we do have another webinar coming up on Tuesday, February 9th, resources for leveraging the counselor-principal relationship. So Sue Shermer and Meredith Doman are going to be putting that on. It's kind of a webinar for those who can't attend their day-long session next week. So definitely one to check out. You can register for that on the ISCA or ICAN website. So again, Tuesday, February 9th. We don't have any questions, so I think you guys must have done a really good job. I think you did a great job.
Wasn't that awesome? No, I just said, I think, yeah, it just all fell together very nicely with what the three other folks shared. So I just want to thank them and give a shout out to them, because it was perfect.
Thank you very much, Susan, for joining us.
Thank you.
We do have one question, but it's for me. The webinar asks if principals can join in, and I would say if you have a principal that wants to join in the webinar, they are more than welcome to. So I think we would be happy to have administrators join us in those conversations. So yes, please invite them.
Well, I think, just listening to this webinar too, though, I think, when it gets taped, I'm going to really pump it out there on the Twitter and the different places to have people watch it, because I think, like I said, it just brings up some really good points about the whole school counseling program and things that you can do, big picture and little picture.
Well, since we don't have any other questions typed in, I'm going to go ahead and thank our advisory or advocacy committee members for taking the time today to talk with us. And this was recorded, so it will be up on the ICAN and the ISCA website by Monday. And we'll send it out on social media and ISCA, let you guys know when the recording is out there. So share it with anyone who couldn't attend today. Review it again for all the great information that was shared. And have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Britt.